Good afternoon to you, Mark Stott of HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion for Tuesday, the 8th of September, 2015. There's a lot to talk about, so let's get right to it. The Pacific, warmer than it should be. We've talked about that a lot. I think it's no surprise. A couple of interesting things. You can see where the hurricanes have taken some of the heat out of the ocean up here, a little bit over here off the Baja, and then this is just a little bit of a weakening of the El Nino from some upwelling water off the coast of South America. But overall, you can see this very warm signal in the eastern Pacific as well as the North Pacific. But also note how warm the Atlantic is, and especially if I take a trip back into time. This is what it looked like the first day of the hurricane season. And this is when lots of people were saying, oh, we're probably going to have very little activity, maybe a hurricane, maybe not. I mean, hardly anything at all. That was the call. And yeah, I could understand that because you see very cool water compared to average stretching through the main development region in the Northeast Atlantic. It just didn't look good at all in terms of favorability for hurricanes. But this is what it looks like now. Quite a bit of a change there, wouldn't you say? The MDR, the main development region, really warmed up. And wouldn't you know it, after we had Anna, and then Bill, and then Claudette, the next four, Danny, Erica, Fred, and Grace, have all been in here. Surprise, surprise. Well, not really, because this water substantially warmed up. I mean, some of these pixel colors in here are indicating a degree, maybe a degree and a half Celsius. We'll just call it a degree. We'll be conservative and say it's about a degree Celsius above the long-term average. Well, that is certainly a heck of a lot warmer than that way back at the beginning of the season, and we still have quite a bit ahead of us. In fact, the August 4th update from Colorado State University was suggesting, and this I'm going to go all the way out to the green here, that the total ACE, or accumulated cyclone energy right here, for the season would be 35. So that's kind of like saying X football team is forecast or projected. What do they call it? The line in Vegas. 35 points, so whoever football team out there is going to score 35, and that's the prediction for Sunday's game. All right? Well, that's the same kind of thing for the ACE. The projection for the season is 35. Normally we have about 104, anywhere from 95 to 105. You can just call it that. It just depends on which methodology you look at. So 35 is pretty low. All right? That's definitely not an active season. Well, where are we today? Well, I checked it out on a couple of websites that have some automatic tracking of the accumulated cyclone energy, which is derived from a formula, which I'm not going to go into here because it's way too complicated, but it's nice that some of this stuff gets automated, believe me, because it'll go out to like 4 decimal places. But today is sitting at around 24. We'll just call it that. I looked it up earlier. So we are not far. We're only 11 points away from that 35 points. How about that? I guess that's what it is. It's ACE points. And it's my contention that we will eclipse that number of 35. And even the earlier forecast of 40 back in the spring and early part of the summer, I believe we'll be sitting up at around 75 before the season is over, because I still think we're going to have a hurricane in the Atlantic that just kind of roams around for days on end at 100, 120 miles an hour, something like that. Something's going to come off and then get caught up here and just kind of meander around whatever and then head out to sea. You watch. It'll happen, and it'll destroy the ACE forecast. That's why that number can be important, because it can show you, yes, you can have these intense hurricanes even in a slow season that don't impact land. So it's all just a part of the overall picture of how a season functions. Anyway, so what's going on out there right now? Well, Grace is sitting here pretty much dead. Invest area 92L. There's Bermuda, so it's far enough away from Bermuda. And this is inland. It's not even an issue any longer. So what's going on? Why did Grace struggle so much? And then even Fred, to some extent, although it did better than I think most people thought it would. Well, here's North America. Here's Florida, Gulf Coast, Yucatan, South America down here. And there's the west coast of Africa. You can see that pretty good. And this brown area that I'm going to highlight in yellow now, This is sinking air. This is air that's going down in the atmosphere. I'm trying to draw a downward arrow. And this is green in here is air that's rising. Okay, and so first of all, when you have it rising here, it usually sinks here. So that's not good. And it's rising, generally speaking, over Africa and then kind of dead in the middle. So, of course, you're not going to have anything really survive in that kind of environment. There is no wide-scale upward motion going on, and so anything in the deep tropics, despite the warmer-than-average water sitting in this area, as you can see, is running headstrong into this sinking motion. And on top of that, there's strong wind shear coming around the tropical upper tropospheric trough, or the TUT, and it's just not favorable, period. Maybe as this moves farther to the east, if it is able to do so, this sort of MJO progression will have some development, and I'm going to allude or get into that as I allude to it now. I'll get into it in more detail in a moment. First of all, track forecasts from the various models for 92L, maybe southeast Newfoundland getting in on the action if it develops. Intensity models show basically an upward trend to the intensity. Some of them not enthusiastic at all. Not uncommon to see that kind of a spread with sort of a hybrid, non-tropical, purely tropical type system, whatever. This is fairly common to see this kind of a spread, so we'll just watch and see what happens. Just for kicks, we'll show the track forecast for Grace sitting out here. Remnants of it going to be over the Greater Antilles if it survives that far in about 5 or 6 days. The intensity guidance, as you would imagine, pretty much holding on to a tropical depression strength, except for this one here, which is all off on its own up into La La Land. Forget about this. The shear, the subsidence is going to kill Grace off, and that'll be that. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, Linda became a major hurricane this afternoon. Here's a satellite picture of that. You can see classic structure. I mean, when these things are over water like this and not impacting land, there's the Baja, speaking of land. You got to admit, that's a thing of beauty. That's just incredible. All that energy getting released over the ocean because of the warm water, because the atmosphere is favorable. That's what it looks like. And it's going to churn away. We'll go back to this and eventually turn off to the west as it weakens. Some of the moisture getting pulled up into the desert southwest, but it's not very deep moisture. So your precipitable water values out here not going up too terribly much. Although it has a pretty large envelope of moisture, that's for sure. If it was going to be turning up into the Baja, which it's not, then we would have a lot more concern for flooding in the southwest U.S. and Mexico, but thus is not the case, or whatever the phrase is. So what's happening out in time? Remember I showed you this map here, and we're getting this green starting to bleed over into the western parts of the Atlantic Basin. Well, for the last several runs, the Euro has indicated, the ECMWF, that we would have low pressure developing in the Gulf of Mexico. Here's southern Texas right here. And this is 168 hours out off of the 12Z run. And this is 240 hours out, 10 days. Normally I wouldn't show this, and I'm certainly going to explain the context of it. Now clearly you see a very large hurricane in the Gulf there at day 10. So how did we get from that to that? Well, obviously the Euro is picking up on something, maybe a tropical wave coming in, which represents heat and energy from the southeast, and stalled frontal system coming in. You know, there's got to be convergence, a focusing mechanism, and the GFS is also showing this, which leads me to believe this is the 168-hour time frame as well. Not far off. The Euro has it about down here. GFS just a little bit farther to the north. See, 168 hours. A little farther to the south than the GFS has it. Well, got to pay attention to it. You know, it's kind of like you go to the doctor and he says, hey man, your blood pressure's up a little bit. 10 years down the road, you don't want that to still be the case. Okay, thanks for letting me know. Nothing to worry about now, but over the next 10 years, get it under control. You want to know that. Well, you know, the models are getting pretty good where they can start to sort of see something out of focus, if you will, several days down the road, a week to 10 days out. So at least you have an idea that something might develop. That hopefully we never have a case where you have a tropical storm in the Bahamas and then a Cat 5 in the lower Keys like we did in Labor Day of 1935. That was horrible. And can you imagine if that happened today? Well, it shouldn't, because the models are hopefully going to pick up on these systems. Now, that was a very small hurricane, and that's different. This is a larger scale weather feature. As I said, there's a tropical wave now that may try to get in here and energize this region. So it's something to watch. We will keep an eye on it. Lots of chatter about it on the hurricane websites and on Twitter from various people. Some saying, oh, there's no way, it's just model feedback, and others are like, well, it might happen. We'll have to just keep an eye on it, and everything in between. So for now, that's what we'll do, is just watch and see. I believe by the weekend we will know if the models continue to latch on it and develop it and the time frame and etc. So maybe by Saturday we'll have a clearer picture. Until then, nothing to worry about for land areas, that's for sure. All right, have a great rest of your Tuesday afternoon. Thanks as always for tuning in. Don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube or you like YouTube itself, whatever, subscribe to our channel. It's Hurricane Track, youtube.com/Hurricane Track. And of course we have our app, which has the blog and these video discussions plus much more, especially when we have field missions, and that's available on the App Store as well as Android devices on Google Play. All right, I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. Again, thanks for tuning in. I'll be back with you again tomorrow.